This is the Children and Families Committee, and I am chairing it this afternoon as Chair West is out, so I will call the meeting to order. It appears that we have a quorum present, and so our next order of business is the minutes of the January 21st, 2025 meeting, and I will ask Representative Zalesnikar if you have had a chance to review those and if you would give a motion to approve them.
Yes, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right, is there a second? I don't think you need a second. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Okay. The first agenda we have on our meeting today is a hearing from Cindy Cunningham. And she's going to be testifying about kind of overall what we're doing today is we're talking about childcare and the lack thereof or the challenges of it across the state. And I know in greater Minnesota, that's where a majority of us are from. That's probably a complaint we hear from quite often, whether if maybe a young couple is waiting to start until maybe they've got on a list to find a spot for childcare, or a single mother looking for some place because she needs to be able to go to work and trying to find those, and it's a great challenge in greater Minnesota. I know that. I hear it from my constituents, but I know it's not immune to, or it's not an issue only in greater Minnesota. It's right here in the metropolitan area as well. And so we'd like to hear, we've got some letters we're gonna be hearing from later, but first we're gonna start off with Cindy Cunningham, and thank you for coming in. I really wish there was more people to hear the challenges that we're facing, the regulations and whatnot. So with that, Cindy, if you would introduce yourself for the committee and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Nelson. Cindy Cunningham, I live 2 miles up the road, is always my joke, I show up. Fortunately, I have a sub who could come in today. I have been a provider in St. Paul for 27 years, and I am the current public policy chair for the State Association for Family Child Care Lead to End Care. There's been a number of name iterations. We changed because I don't like acronyms, and so I convinced, so we used to be MCPIN, MCCPIN. So if you saw that, that's who we are now. Excuse me, I have been on most all working groups over the past 14 years, including Family Child Care Task Force, where the modernization came out of. There have been many changes made to support child care out of that project. The loss of family child care programs, as you know and have stated, has continued and therefore has increased the strain on families, in particular in greater Minnesota. I had the privilege during the modernization to get to know a number of the economic development people in greater Minnesota and hear firsthand up from your end. I used to live in greater Minnesota, so that's my claim to connection. The state is investing high dollars to support and increase child care, yet family child care providers continue to decline. The investments aren't working. There needs to be a change. As many have stated, we are in a crisis situation. I've asked for the fact sheet from the Office of Economic Status of Women to be passed out. I was able to be at their November meeting. It clearly shows where the investments need to be made. His centers are the 4th highest in the nation. Family child care continues to be the most affordable and culturally responsive to families. We are also an industry largely made up of women, so strong women business leaders. The topic of child care and family child care is complicated and as unique as the businesses and providers themselves. Family child care is not a cookie cutter like centers can be. Family child care is focused on the care of children and families, and we want to ensure the health and safety of these children, all the while enriching them for their lives. The letters submitted, I know some have attested to the fact that managing our business is costly, not only in finances but in personal ways. When our records are made public, it is our name that is attached to any violations rather than a center's name or director. The first part, I'm going to go through some of the cost, and then I do have some information on licensing, and I'll try not to make this the whole day for all of you. One of the pieces that providers talk about is the food expense and the high cost of feeding all of these lovely children. We do have a federal food program. In the federal food program, there are 2 tiers. There's a higher rate tier that's significantly higher than the second tier. We have worked, Lead and Care has worked with Senator Smith to try to get that changed at the federal level. It was put to 1 rate for the COVID pandemic. And there's a bill that is in Congress that's not moving for the last couple of years. Also, we have the problem in Challenge in Minnesota that the special license that is going in many of your communities, whether you want to term them the pods or in businesses, commercial businesses, churches, frequently cannot qualify to be on the family childcare food program. They can be on the center food program, but that means that's a much more complicated. And MDE in our conversations has indicated that it's very difficult for one of those commercial-based family childcare licenses to qualify for the food program. That means we have that many more children going without financial support for food. We would like to suggest that the state, and everything I say, I know we're in a budget crisis, and I know we have all kinds of things, so my asks are my asks. The state could create a system to supplement programs on the lower tier. We submit the food program. I had the opportunity to actually run it past my food program this morning when they visited. And it's like, so we have a number of meals, it's very clearly identified, and then the reimbursement rate, whichever one it is. So it would be an accounting system to figure out what's the difference if someone is in the food program. The standard of which tier you're on is done by geography, so you don't have a choice of which tier you're on. One person can be on one side of the street and get a higher tier, the other side of the street get a lower tier. So the state could help reimburse and bring both up to an equal. The other is, and this will be a little bit more complicated, but there could be, and I think would be well invested with the number of Greater Minnesota going to these special licenses, that there be somehow a supplement made for those programs to be able to have financial support for food. The Great Start compensation has proven helpful to family child care programs. It needs to be continued for investment, and we're suggesting an evaluation of which programs are actually being supported. Currently, certified centers, which are not licensed centers, have a much lower standard of regulations. A 16-year-old can oversee a classroom, and in regulation, it's for infants. So for a 16-year-old to even oversee any classroom compared to what we do in licensed programs, we suggest that the comparison is not their family, friends, and neighbor get a stipend for their participation and support. Again, the certified centers are getting a 1-to-1 equal to any of the licensed programs. So we would like to see that reevaluated. Reimbursements for grants is another financial challenge. We are a benefit from having grants through Parent Aware or regional grants, a lot of state money through those directions. However, we're required to do we're required to pay 100% upfront. And so if you get a $3,000 Parent Aware grant, you're supposed to come up with $3,000 to be able to purchase and to be able to benefit from that. And then it takes minimum of 30, but usually up to 90 days to get a reimbursement. And many people don't have that money to be able to do that. The facilities grant is an exception. It's a 90% upfront and 10% once completed. We would like to see that to be put into statute for all funding. Many of us, most people actually, enter this profession with our own children in care, and then those children end up taking up a slot. We want it obviously introduced in a manner that's the ratio, that it would be out of ratio or a compensation. We don't get child care tax credits. We get no financial benefit, including the food program. We don't get to claim our own children. So we're providing a service in a business, and yet our own children take up slots that we can't fill and bring in income with. Part of my other piece about DHS is, that would be an interesting connection with this, is that recently DHS has made a decision, though they are refusing to make it public. I happen to have access to conversations with them, that they've made a legal ruling where our own children, for our parental rights, aren't included in our supervision and what happens in the house. So currently, without that information, when my children were in care, they had to be with me, they had to be fully supervised, they were like a daycare child in care. And there's merit maybe for younger kids, but as our kids get older, we go into childcare to help with our own kids, and then our kids end up resenting them being in our households because they have to toe this line in their own home. So again, the commissioner did make a decision that is only public to licensors at this point, that our children can be in their own room. They don't have to be in that supervised area. Parents can go, so this whole freedom part, and it again is part of my frustration with licensing, is I will always say it's not necessarily the detail, it's the communication and the implementation. There's no reason why providers shouldn't know about this. And if you combined that decision in DHS along with a shift in some of these other allowing of our children to not count in the ratios at that point, I think there's basis to be able to do that. One of the complications, so that's the financial part. On the DHS licensing part and the system of family child care, one of the complications is that we are, so MDE is funded by the state for schools and for Head Start. And many of those programs are pulling our preschoolers out, where therefore, again, we don't have enough preschoolers to be a good business. And again, that's with state invested taxpayer dollars. The other part is that DHS actually also gets state funding to license and oversee centers and the aforementioned certified centers, but I've asked for the dollars, I haven't gotten them yet, about what the 3 different budgets are. They do get some state funding for a manager and a couple staff people to oversee and communicate. But again, I did ask, I haven't gotten the budgets to see what the discrepancy is. But I'm putting it in the context that DHS somewhat has a conflict of interest in where they spend their time and their efforts. They are willing to talk about creating different smaller centers for Greater Minnesota. It was openly said at the Office of Economic Status of Women hearing. But at the same hearing, I was told when I tried to talk to them about some of the licensing challenges we had and some of the things they had said about us, I was directly told, we can't do anything about that. It's a delegated license. Maybe you should do something. And I was like, okay. It took me a couple days. So a lot of this thought process and solutions comes out of that challenge. But for our programs to be able family child care is an unfunded delegated license. So the counties don't get, if you talk to your economic development and your licensing units and stuff, they get nothing from the state to manage our overseat, to pay for licensors, to pay for staff, or to do anything within the county. It's all county funded. So in Ramsey County, we have one shared clerk. We had a major cut in the number of licensors, which may be somewhat appropriate as far as also the decline. However, it just leaves that much less staff to be able to oversee, to communicate, to follow up. Right now, we're in the middle background studies, and that poor one clerk, shared clerk, is having, I don't know that she's having a hard time, but I do know that that's quite a heavier burden to expect that clerk to be able to handle that kind of additional. So some of the communication has been limited or not as timely as we would do. The conflict of interest, part of the way we're seeing it too, is that in actions like DHS actually failed to, my terminology, failed to hire a manager for 8 months. So there's a manager that's being paid for by state tax dollars that I was referring to, was open from January until I think it was September or October, and they finally put a new hire in. And during that whole time period, then there was little to no ability for us to be able to communicate and get information. That was also the time period for the modernization, which was a pretty dynamic time period for all of us. And in that time, we can't get good communication from DHS. Speaking of the modernization, because, I'm going to say because, there was a first non-public draft for the modernization, and I didn't know about it until they kept referring to, this is second draft, and I kept saying, where's the first draft? I finally got a copy of the first draft, and that centers, like our association, centers were able to look at the first draft, give input, and have changes made to their discussions. I'm not privy to exactly how that looked, but they had an ability to look at it before it was made public. And that was a DHS move. I feel that we should have had the same ability, and maybe it wouldn't have been such a hot mess for everybody. Excuse me. So the question always is, why are programs closing or not opening? Licensing is a big piece. The communication, I've always said, for a long time said, it's not the specifics in the regulation, it's the communication and the implementation. And that really has gotten worse over the last couple of years. There's been staffing change and essentially a philosophy change, where before staff would communicate with programs such as mine and say, this is what's coming, this is what we'd like to do, have an engagement session, have a discussion, find out what's going to work or not work. That went away about 2 years ago, and we get virtually none of that collaborative input. Consequently, we're either getting no information or we're getting information like we've gotten in the last few weeks, which is wrong. And then when we ask them to change it or share it or say where tell programs where the correct is, they tell us, go talk to your licensor. Well, they've made it public. They've made it public wrong. They won't fix it. They tell us to talk to the licensors, but why would you go talk to your licensor if you've said it's this particular way, right? And in that, then we have the other challenge that the OLA report from February of 2024 of the counties, the state's support to the counties showed deficiencies, not just in licensing, a lot in some of the other delegated, but we see it. So DHS is not communicating well. There's about a once a month that we are aware of meeting between state DHS and licensors. It's not required. I have had people within that system tell me they have to ask for the slides. They don't get the direct information about what's changed or what's modified, such as things like providers' own children in care. My county didn't know about it until I told them, and then they had to go do their research. So that whole piece about go talk to your licensor falls completely apart because our licensors, we are finding, don't know as much as maybe some of us do with what's going on. In general, DHS has said that they will, like my example, they'll send out one blanket, like one heading, one communication, but they will not give us updates about what they and the licensors discuss on these Thursday meetings that dynamically affect how things are interpreted for us, and they won't send out corrections. Consequently, we don't even know what the rules are. I actually teach a class on reading the rules and reading legislation, and I'm having a difficult time figuring out how to focus in to get that done. The revisor's office has changed a lot of the pieces. Because of the new department, I have tried to ask licensing, okay, can we use this ELISI tool? What can we do to help providers know what is even currently in law? And at this point, I haven't gotten an answer in the last 2 weeks. So again, if we don't know what the law is or where the law is, and licensors know or don't know, it's pretty much just a hot mess as far as knowing what our rules are. To me, that is the biggest piece why people leave. It's because we don't know what the rules are. We don't know how to follow them. Licensors come out, have all power of both of the knowledge, but also about putting in the consequences. And so providers are at a great disadvantage of trying to even following the rules. Currently, the DHS website, which is termed our help website, is not up to date. There were legislative actions changed last year that are not. There's training forms that are not up to date, they're inerrant. And we finally had an answer that they will update the training documents. And but they don't know when it's going to get updated on the website because they only have one staff to do everything. It's like, okay, so in the meantime, all licensors and providers are looking at this website for factual information to know how to do our jobs and run our businesses, and it's not correct. And again, who has the right information? We actually have licensors who don't know some of the updates again. So what we would like to see is on that OLA report, I'll go to the solutions. We would really like to see that the recommendations in the OLA report be implemented. And what it would look like is that DHS would find an effective way of communicating, not just saying something and expecting that everybody listened and understood, because they're not. But that there would be somehow a system put up where DHS be required to make sure that licensors know and understand what is expected of them in the rules to enforce. And within a few weeks, they don't like the word simultaneous, but that they would be required to give us the same information. This not sharing information with us. I don't know what businesses can function on that if the officials are the only ones who know and understand the rules. We need to be able to have that. We would like to suggest, and I've talked to a few counties on this, we would like to suggest that this, I'll use the word competition, between state-funded programs, which is centers, certified centers, schools, and Head Starts all have state direct funding for oversight and supports. That the state, we don't want to have a state license because it's not going well, but we really like the county jurisdiction and investment and collaboration, right, within the county. But if there would be a way for the state to provide an equitable funding directly to the counties so that the counties can therefore then staff and take care of some of the situations that we have. The state is funding DHS to adequately staff for centers. I think there should be a recognition that family child care also needs to be looked at that too. One of the other ones is that there's a lot of money that is going out to different organizations, including aspects like a pipeline and a mentoring through the higher education. Those are two examples family child care can't even participate in because we have to have an employee, you have to have the workers' comp. There's a lot of things that have to happen for us to be able to, and I've said in many meetings, to try to figure out how to make those work for family child care. And everybody's like, it's not working. So I think the state needs to look at, okay, there are fundings for childcare, but it's not benefiting this industry. There's also the point where the idea of actually headhunting for businesses within the counties. It's kind of like everybody else is trying to do this, but I think the county's economic development people would do a lovely job recruiting for their own communities because they would be in contact with the people that are there. They know who is in their community who needs care. And we would be happy to help figure out some ways to do that. We are down to 5,700 programs. At one point, we were over 10,000 a couple years. I think we've down 2,000 in the last couple years. I think it's even on the handout you've got. Whatever investments the state is doing and all organizations that are working on to change this are doing it with good intent and good attempt, but it's not working. So I think we're proposing some dynamic changes by doing the OLA report, stabilize licensing, funding directly to counties to support staff, and also then through DEED, treat us like a business, because that's what DEED does. And so then help our industry and help counties get funding directly to be able to find and support. One of my conversations with a senator was, we've got a lot of money going in for facilities. We don't have money going in to recruit people to be in the business. So I'll stop at that point, so thank you.
So, thank you, and I think before, I'll turn my microphone on here, sorry. Thank you for your testimony, and I think before you leave, is there any questions? Representative Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Cunningham, I just wanted to thank you for being here and providing this. This is my third term in the House of Representatives, and I don't think I've received a testimony from an expert who provided so much bullet point list of these are things that we can do to make things better. So I really appreciate that, and ensure that we have your contact information so that we can get working with you on some of these. I burned through my pencil trying to take notes with all the great information that you provided. So thank you truly for being here today.
Thank you, Representative Wilson.
Any others? So, well, thank you, Ms. Cunningham, for your testimony
Thank you for
today.
your efforts, it's needed.
And now we are going to, in your packets, there's some letters to, there's some letters that have been written into the committee from across the state. And you know, quite oftentimes they get, the material in the packets get overlooked. They're not read, they're not, well, maybe they kind of, as you're listening to a testifier, maybe sometimes you'll page through one. Hopefully that didn't happen today because Ms. Cunningham's testimony was great. But I think we'll start off with Representative Zalesnikar. I think that you have some testimony that you would like to share from, as you've reached out to care providers in your area. And one of the things we want to make sure of, that we're not just having an airing of grievances, but that this is, you know, stating regulations that are really crippling the continuation or the startup of childcare across the state. And that's something that has been a challenge. We've continued to see the numbers drop across the state, and a bigger and bigger challenge to do that. And it's easy to hear a complaint about it, but what we really want to hear today is, you know, specific regulations that are impacting the continuation of childcare. So with that, Representative Zalesnikar, if you would like to share the testimony that you have.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you to the testifier today for bringing awareness to this epidemic we really have across the state. We've lost over 50% of our family child care providers, and we also are not seeing a lot of growth in freestanding centers, which is problematic for the workforce initiatives in the state. So the first one I want to share with you is a little bit of what happened after the 100-page proposed new rules took place. Some providers chose to retire and resign and go work for other people, social workers, teachers that had started family child care, and decided that this wasn't what they were going to pursue anymore. And the comment to me that is just sad is historically, licensors served as a supportive resource. However, their roles have shifted to a more punitive environment, which has created a barrier to open communication. Furthermore, the star rating system unfairly disadvantages a home-based child care model and often lacks the necessary resources and the staff. These are one homeowner that's running their child care program that wears many hats, and it's their own small business. And they are now burdened by many mandated reports, and they do not have layers of staffing to support these mandated documentation comparable to a center. And unfortunately, that resulted in losing a provider at a time when we really need a provider that the community loved. The second one I'm going to read comes from Rice Lake, Minnesota, in my district, and it states the Minnesota's child care mandates are causing issues in child care facilities. The hiring requirements are very difficult. They're seen as a huge negative impact, sometimes to the applicants. The requirements on what each tier needs, and then what we can afford to pay, makes hiring next to impossible. We all know the cost of care in the state of Minnesota. When hired training and education is ongoing, which is common in healthcare too. The CPR, though, and first aid used to go towards educational hours, but that no longer qualifies. That's additional hours now they have to do on their own time. It's just stacking, a continual stack of hours without including it in the totals. And those are things that we'll certainly be able to look at this committee. Silly citations for repairs that are very expensive, again, are coming out of very slim margins, and many of the providers are running at a loss and/or hoping to break even, which is not a sustainable childcare model. We want to continue to create supportive environments where children can learn. Childcare centers and home daycares need more support and need to be heard about what impacts them. Children are always our futures, and we're here to, teachers are helping build their future. We as one, we need to be able to help support the people, and I think we heard that from the testimony today, is finding adequate support. Another comes from Duluth, too, a director of a center, a freestanding center. They spent 10 years of their career as a television news reporter, went into childcare. And the perspective is interesting. It states some of these statutes are not serving the common good anymore. While they're intent to keep children safe, they are instead nothing more than paperwork, in my opinion. Some of these statutes put into law take away time from the kids. The children need their teacher to be focused and worried about them at all times. The stress of having to document everything and every move takes the joy out of this profession. There are nearly 2,500 ways I can be written up by DHS when a licensor makes their unexpected visit. The COVID years, things were different. DHS scaled back many of its regulations, and I never felt so supported as a provider when they made that decision. We kept children safe without those regulations, and we can do the same now with similar support. He goes on to say, lead suggestions which will be valuable to the committee to review further. If a provider feels that they could care for 11 or 12 preschool children aged 3, 4, and 5, allow them to do so. This alone would bring in an additional $10,000 for each child while maintaining a classroom where teachers and students can thrive in a center. And this is a time when we have multiple families on long waiting lists. He states, I feel the infant and toddler ratios are right where they need to be. Paperwork requirements are too extensive. I was almost written up for a fix-it ticket for an individual child care program that they didn't think I had reviewed. I wrote the program. I presented it to the family, and I know the program. The provider hub needs work, the licensing modernization standards, and we talked about that, so I'm not going to. But we have received tremendous detail. And the reason they're not here is they live far away and they're providing care right now. So I'm thrilled that we have a family child care provider that could find a substitute to allow her to come testify. And that's why we're reading these, so that their voices are heard. The Hartley Nature Center I toured in Duluth, a nature-based child care program, fantastic program for preschool children, ages 3 to 5. Again, the same thing, talking about the lack of child care. In Duluth, we're lacking 1,100 child slots for children 0 to 5. That's just Duluth alone. We're struggling to maintain the high-quality providers, and it's many, many issues. Like we've talked about, we want to pay the people the best we can pay them. We want to be able to do that. Childcare is increasingly unaffordable. Suggest maintaining the early learning scholarship to fund low-income families. Go into detail of the percentage they're paying as for their own family, which we've talked about. Childcare providers are facing constant stream of updates and changes that are making providers close programs that are preventing new programs from being opening. People have fear. When there's not consistency and there's not reliability on what you can have a predictable business model, people are fearful to create a business model when they don't know what's going to come next. No one expected 100 pages of a new licensing standard that was proposed. The providers pushed back, and we know where we're at today. We're waiting for the next step. But the draft child care licensing standards that were introduced in 2024, she simply states would have put my program out of business had that not been delayed. There's already one in here that chose to close as soon as they read them because they didn't trust that the government was going to go back and do the same thing. We can't afford to lose more providers. Again, the great start, having flexible funding, having reasonable licensing and quality standards, a collaborative approach where we trust the providers and we bring back respect to the industry. Those are some of the meaningful ones from the center. And another one I'm just going to read, and there's others too, but this lady has been a childcare provider in the Cloquet, Carleton area, Carleton County, and it also does training and states, we have to look with family childcare providers. We're including their own children in the ratios. It's reducing slots for people in the community to have placements. We need to consider a policy that discourages providers from continuing to try to run to not be able to have their children counted, that punitive model with their own children. And I think there's opportunities, we can look at some of those opportunities as we go out through this session. The licensing barriers, it's the same theme of the paperwork and the licensing barriers. And members, I think we heard today some of the conflicts of running a small business for a family child care provider and making that be able to be breaking even, not even a profit margin to make people come into the field to be enticed to do that. So in the centers, the freestanding centers, finding a way to balance that. We know from last year when the First Finance did a survey, I think of 1,300 providers, they noted that they suspected there would be financial instability from freestanding centers and family child care providers because the preschool students could move to the school-based program and they have teacher pay at a different level through the school systems. They predicted that they would have concerns because it was documented from all the providers surveyed that they lose money on infants, they start to break even on toddlers, and they start to make a profit at the preschool at the same moment when the model was being shifted to move the preschoolers to a school-based program. And while I think the preschool program is fantastic, I think that we are hearing the question of how do we support all three corners of the triangle of family childcare and center-based, freestanding center-based childcare and the school-based model. And all three things should be true at a time when we have workplace initiatives. And so these are the reports from Northern Minnesota. And members, there's one from the Minnesota Child Care Association, and then there's one from the New Prague Red Wing area, and also another from Floodwood that is modeling the same concerns. Floodwood was one of the newest centers, and this is a 3-page document of the concerns laid out, highlighting the very same things. And this is a brand new center, the Polar Cubs Childcare. And so we want to make sure that the freestanding centers and the family child care centers, whether they're brand new or they've been operating for 5-10 years, are going to be stable. And so thank you all for submitting this fantastic information for us to review. And I look forward to finding real solutions this session.
Thank you, Representative Zalesnikar. And next, I believe we will go to Representative Altendorf. You've had some great conversations with providers in your district, and I think you have some letters that you would like to share as well.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you everyone for attending today. This is a very important meeting, and I have been talking to people in my district, and it is very sad to see, especially the number of in-home daycare centers that have been closing, and to just hear their individual stories of the regulations that overburden some regulations that is forcing them to close. And so many of these people go into this because they have young children and different reasons. And it's just really concerning to see government overstep. And, you know, this isn't by an opinion, it's by fact. When we see 50% of these in-home daycares closing, Government has far overstepped their bounds on this, and we do need to repeal, we do need to fix, and we have to go back to a system that works for everyone. But I did reach out, and this would have been a fantastic testifier, Stephanie. She was busy, but I am going to read this because she has so many points. So my name is Stephanie Mayhell, and I am one of the executive owners of Early Childhood Academy. We have 3 locations located in New Prague, Belle Plaine, and Red Wing, which is in my district. A little background about ECA. We are very new. We purchased 3 operating centers where the previous owners, they were done. They were ready to close, and our goals and efforts are to keep childcare centers up and running. However, there are so many reasons they are closing, and many preventative ones. We purchased the 3 locations in the fall of 2022, right after COVID, and after almost 9 months of the licensing process, we finally became official with our ECA license in the summer of 2023. It has been a grueling road and licensing and trying to DBA so as not to close and disrupt the care of their families. And just stop and think about that. 9 months to get permitted. I have attached the top 5 challenges we take on each and every day, but as a newer licensee going through the licensing process, I have many thoughts and facts on how the regulations made it too easy for us to close shop and take our business to another state. Minnesota is one of the most expensive states for childcare, is also one of the most and highest regulated. I am confident as a business owner, we can cut costs and make our services more affordable is Minnesota and DHS would have common sense regulations and policies. These are some of their top challenges. Staff education requirements. Minnesota demands some of the highest staff qualifications in the country, requiring post-secondary education for teachers. Border town centers, so Red Wing's right on the border with Wisconsin, struggle to compete with the neighboring states like Wisconsin and North Dakota, where qualifications are less strict. Qualified staff often cannot be hired at the wages the child care centers can afford. We are not able to compete with the school districts, the salary pay, which is where most teacher qualified employees will work, making it difficult to keep the staff and the centers having to pay for those trainings and credentials. Next bullet is strict staff to child ratios and scheduling. Ratios require maintaining full staff even during nap time and in infant rooms, making it difficult to provide breaks to allow teachers time for their lesson planning. We then have to hire more, like floaters, to cover rooms at nap times to ensure this. Merging age groups is limited to short time frames, increasing staffing needs unnecessarily. The next bullet is costly and restricted training requirements. Only DHS-approved development trainings count towards required hours, limiting access to more affordable or relevant options. Annual training requirements, 24 hours per staff, are extensive than many other professions and add significant costs. The next bullet is inconsistent licensing enforcement. Rules are open to interpretation. This leads to inconsistent citations. An example would be a foot pedal garbage can, nap time shoe policies. What one licensor allows may now be cited by another, creating great confusion and extra costs to comply. The next bullet, public citations and reputation risks. Citations for minor issues, examples of like chopstick in a backpack, a loose rug corner, or a toy out of reach, are publicly listed and damage the center's reputation. Parents misinterpret vague wording in these citations, assuming safety concerns where actually none existed, which impacts our enrollment. This makes our center look bad, and then families do not want to roll or work with us. These over-regulations and inconsistencies make it expensive and stressful to operate, discouraging providers and limiting access to quality childcare in Minnesota. In addition to the top 5, here are a few more, and I don't know if you, Vice Chair, do you want me to bullet those to continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Here are a few more details we have to follow, and I hope we all just can understand in the public, you know, this is just truly burdensome, and this is just, it's one of those, it's a scenario that the government just says they know better than people, and it's just not true. And so maybe some of these regulations were made with a good point in mind, but overall, it's not sustainable in our system, and we're seeing that as the daycare centers are collapsing. So let me just go through these. There's very ambiguous DHS rules. Interpretation and enforcement of regulations vary by licensor, and over time, they lead to inconsistent citations. Again, the foot pedal garbage cans required but expensive, and they are actually prone to breaking, while hands-free alternatives are not accepted. Children's shoes at nap time. Citations for shoes falling off during sleep, even though other centers allow children to remain in socks. Citation wording, overly harsh descriptions of minor issues, such as a child's chapstick labeled as a dangerous substance or chemical. Using a wet wipe is described as exposing children to chemicals and medication. A rug corner bending resulting in an unsafe environment citation. Toy inventory audits. Licensors count every toy, even blocks, to ensure compliance, citing centers for missing pieces. Restricted access enforcement. Temporarily removing toys to manage behavior results and citations for denying access to development toys. If a toilet is not flushed, which would be common with toddlers in preschools who are potty training, we are cited for unclean and hazardous environments. We have to do assessments on school agers, even though they get assessed at their public schools and not with us year-round or only before and after school. They cannot vacuum when kids are in the room. Cannot adequately clean space rooms with mopping or vacuums. We can only use plastic bags to put soiled clothes in. Happens multiple times a day in every room. And if that bag is considered in reach of a child, we could be cited for exposing the child to dangerous materials, as the plastic bag is considered a choking hazard. We cannot put it in their bags or their backpacks, as they can reach so, typically set on top of their cubbies. If not pushed back far enough and a child reaches up and can still possibly grab it, we would be cited. Separation reports have to be documented if you take a child out of the classroom for a walk or drink of water to calm down and help co-regulate. Sometimes kids just need a moment out of their classroom environment to calm down if they're upset. We can't do this without this report, and usually can provide any way as a staff. Leaving a classroom will lead to it being out of ratio, and we could then be cited for two different things. In a staff and room steps into hallway to get something out of a child's cubby, they could be cited for being out of ratio. Centers need to hire floaters. This is a great deal of cost to just cover their bathroom breaks. Step out of the hallway to get something out of a cubby. And again, it's this out of ratio formula. If a child's wipes, diaper cream, water bottle, etc. is not labeled in first and last name, we could be cited. If a teacher is logging something onto their communication app on tablet while in the room and kids awake, they could be cited for not being in sight of kids. Cannot have adult-sized chairs for teachers to comfortably sit in, as unsafe for children. Could climb on and the children could get hurt. Infants have to immediately be taken out of the swing bouncer if they fall asleep in it. If a licensor walks in your room and a child just fell asleep in a swing and you are changing a diaper with another child, we will be cited as they are sleeping in the swing and can only sleep in their crib. When applying sunscreen, most any time child outside in spring or summer, you must wear and change gloves and wash hands between each child. I mean, that's an extensive list. I am a mother of 5. I don't know how they all survived, really. I mean, when I read this, I don't know how they all survived. I was fortunate enough to stay home with them. They did not go to a daycare. This is grossly overburdensome of government regulations. And the state of Minnesota, this year, I look forward to really working to help get our daycare centers back in order so that people can go back to work.
Thank you, Representative Altendorf. Is there any other stories that Representative McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a story, so if there's some letters to be read that's on the agenda, go ahead. I can wait until those are finished before I have a question.
I think we're pretty well through them, so if there's a question you have.
Yeah, question, comment. I think this reminds me of Ronald Reagan's great quote when he said, "Government isn't the answer to the problem, government is the problem." And certainly we recognize that. You know, after COVID, Minnesota's childcare raised 60% after COVID, 60%. That's 45% higher than any other state so far. This might be no news to some, but it certainly is to me, and I'm going to use this effectively to be an effective member here to hopefully solve some problems and come to some solutions. But what is it called? TUTRIS website. Have you heard of that? It's a childcare website. It's TOOTRIS. Write that down. There is a wealth of information on here, and I just was able to find out why Minnesota is so expensive, and our neighboring states are certainly much less than us. South Dakota, for example, is $6,511 per infant. 4-year-old is $6,349. That's South Dakota. So we certainly aren't competitive with our neighboring state of South Dakota. Incidentally, they're income tax free as well. North Dakota charges on approximately $9,000 per baby, infant, and $8,221 for 4-year-old. Wisconsin, they're a little bit higher, but certainly less than Minnesota. They're $12,542 per infant and $10,000 for a 4-year-old. Incidentally, the University of Wisconsin-Madison's tuition is only $9,273. So if you can afford childcare there, you might even be able to afford to send your child to college there. The average family of 3 to 4 kids, and certainly we have several of those out in the Wright County, a lot of Finnish families, that's a cost of $27,636 up to $38,000 per year for childcare. Now, our ratio is 9 to 1. Our ratio is 9 to 1 child. Minnesota does have the most safe childcare facilities in the nation, according to this website, which I think if you go through it and do some review, you'll find it to be very helpful and resourceful. But we are definitely the most safe childcare state, but who can afford it? The average in Minnesota, the average in the America is 4 to 1. So we certainly have a lot of homework to do here, and we need to, as Representative Altendorf say, release the burden of government overregulation. I have now 2 grandchildren, and thanks be to God, their mother's staying home. So it's a one-income household, but she's staying home because of the cost of health care. And if we can't figure it out this year, with the makeup of the legislature, where we all have to work together, then we're complete failures. This has been one of the most expensive things that we've all heard for the last, I don't know how many years, especially the last, since 2020, COVID. And it's, as you all can understand and hear Representative Altendorf say some of those regulations, it's just unacceptable. I hope you all agree with this. I know some of you do, and I think you all will do, that we need to release the burden. That means repealing some of these mandates. And as all we have to do is look to our neighboring states, what they're doing successfully. That's what we do as lawmakers, don't we? We look at on their recidivism rates, on their prisons. We do it on their healthcare costs. We do it on education. We don't have all the answers. But some of our neighboring states, especially those close by, have the answers, and they've done it successfully and cheaply, if that's a word, less expensive. So I look forward to, Mr. Chair, of drafting legislation. I think we'll all do, maybe collectively we can do it together, to get these damn mandates released, and I shouldn't have sworn, pardon me, released and release the power of our child daycare facilities and let people afford them. We are doing the right thing. And I do have a question for Mrs. Cunningham, and that was the question. If you would approach the dais, or the testifying table.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McDonald, or
Mr. Chair.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you. It is frustrating to hear, sometimes I get my Irish up when I hear some of these overburdened things and how they're just hurting families. The average on your flyer here says it's $20,000, $165. According to that website, it's around $16,500. But it did indicate there's other expenses associated with childcare that are hidden that we don't know of. It could be food, sometimes they pack their own food, could be lessons, of soccer lessons, or field trips. So there are other burdens and expenses. Is that $20,165 include kind of a holistic view of what the cost is per month for an infant?
Thank you,
Ms.
Representative.
Cunningham.
Yeah, thank you for presenting. Actually, the person, that is not my fact sheet. I just love it. So that's actually, Heather has the Office of Economic Status of Women would be able to know for sure where that dollar came from.
So, if you would like to come to the table, and then if you would please, for the record, introduce yourself, and then proceed with the question, or proceed with the answer, I guess.
Certainly, thank you. My name is Heather Heyer. I'm the Director of the Office on the Economic Status of Women at the Minnesota Legislative Coordinating Commission. I'm only going to say that once because it's a lot of words. Okay, so the number you were referencing, was it the $20,165 for childcare? That number, yeah, that was based on childcare aware data from 2024, which was the first 3 months of last year on average in the state. So it differs a little bit by, by sector, or quadrant of the state, I guess you could say, on what that cost is. But could you repeat the other part of your question that you had?
Representative McDonald.
Oh, thank you. I think the other question was more of a comment and stated that included in some of these numbers, or not included in some of these numbers, are hidden costs, such as food and diapers and field trips as well.
Thank you. Yes, I think one of the other quotes I have on this document is about, on the second page here, where it talks about the current childcare business model is not sustainable in greater Minnesota. So the costs may be stable across the state, but it's labor force that can increase or decrease your profitability, if that makes sense. So costs excluding labor for providing childcare are consistent statewide, but providers in greater Minnesota cannot charge as much tuition. So that kind of speaks to the question you're asking about.
Mr. Chair, thank you very
Mr.
much. Well, Mr. Chair, I have nothing else to say other than the fact that it's not true. I do always have something to say. That in Minnesota, that over half of our counties are a childcare desert. 87 counties, and over half of them are childcare desert. We've created this. I don't think anybody on this side of the aisle, but it's been created at this legislature. And we simply, if we can do anything in this session, it's address this childcare issue. California, and the last thing I'll just say, California, high taxes, high place, high cost of living. Their childcare is only $16,945, and Minnesota's $20,000. We can do better. As Paul Wellstone said, we can do better when we all do better. Mr. Chair.
So, thank you, Representative McDonald. And any other comments? Otherwise, I've got a few closing. Representative Nadeau.
I also want to thank you for coming in. And I know this was short notice, and I really want to thank my colleagues for, reading through these things. We get a lot of information. In Minnesota, we do have some of the safest daycare centers, disabled provider centers, nursing facilities, ICFs, we do. And those are things that we can be proud of, Mr. Chair. But in some cases, we become overzealous. We lose track of trying to find that balance between making sure that we're keeping children safe and making sure that people can access either care or childcare, or things like that. And I think as I read through and listened to all these things, the thing that came through was that the agency has lost its ability to listen to the actual people that are providing the care. And I think that's where we need to focus. I think it's incumbent upon us, and I agree, that we need to draft some bills and we need to, really try to figure out how we can fix this. I mean, for me, this started back in 2011 when Governor Dayton decided to try to unionize daycare providers. And I'm not here to cast blame. It was a subject that he thought was important. He thought it would expand care. He thought it would, bolster wages, and it did the absolute opposite. It created an environment where people just didn't want to enter the industry. It became more difficult to sustain a business model, and it didn't attack the issue. And the issue is we need more. We've lost over 50% since 2011. And we had 12,000 in 2011. We have just over 6,000 family care providers today. And, that number continues to go down, and I applaud the people that are out there that, it takes a special person, to do what you guys do. I work in the disabled community, a lot like some of my friends. I couldn't do that work, and these people do this work for wages. They're not, these are low wages. And so we have some of the highest costs. We have some of the lowest wages. And so I think that's the challenge that we have to start looking at and saying, where can we have an impact at a legislative level that increases that capacity for providers to enter the market, make sure that we're protecting children, ensuring that we take an all of the approach, look at childcare provision at schools, it's family care providers, it's unlicensed providers, it's community providers, it's, all of these things. And I just think that we need to open our minds and really try to work together. And hopefully, when the other side of the aisle gets here, we're going to be able to work alongside them to create some real solutions in this as well. This is important. I am from the suburbs, if people don't know, and it is a huge issue. I know that there's deserts in greater Minnesota, but there's no access in the suburbs. The centers are full, family care providers aren't there. I mean, every area has different challenges, and I look forward to working alongside you guys to try to solve this. So thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nadeau, or Representative Nadeau. And as I close this up today, I think a couple of things we want to remember is that, the safety of our children is primary, and that, that is of first importance. And I do believe that we can maintain things safely, having a regulatory issue, a regulatory climate that allows us to continue to safely do our jobs and not allow harm to come to our children. I think that's something that's important to all of us. Myself, having raised 5 children, having a grandchild now, I know I might not look old enough, but I do have a grandchild, so. But, having that and making sure that we, maintain cost. It's something that's, or actually not maintaining, reducing cost, bringing that cost down and being able to bring it into line that our providers can afford to do this business. Many of them, it's not because they're getting wealthy off of their jobs. It's doing it out of necessity, and it's doing something that they love. And as legislators, oftentimes when we pass a law, we have an intention for what it's going to do. And unfortunately, many times the agencies in the rulemaking, it oftentimes takes a different direction. And I think that's some of what has happened with this, with the rules that have been passed, the laws, the statutes that we have worked on. And they've gone in a different direction than what was intended and what was planned on. And I think with that, it kind of leads me to my final point. I think it's terribly unfortunate that the agencies aren't here today, the DHS and DCYF. Why they're not here today, hopefully they're going to watch this hearing. I think there's a lot of great things to hear. But they're not here today to hear the concerns. And I think that's many of these letters that were written in. They wrote in the letters to us because they feel that their voices are not being heard already. I think there's a big disconnect between what is happening in our communities and what is happening here in the concrete buildings of St. Paul, or maybe even more likely, the office at home that is being working remotely. And that's something that I think it's been evident. I think what happened in the election in November was a reflection of people getting fed up with their voices not being heard. And I think that's why we are here today, and the Minnesota has sent us here to do this work. And I would encourage all people, all members to show up and do the job. And let's get working on this, and that we can start working on solving this, the crisis that we're having in this state. So with that, if there's nothing further, that concludes the agenda for today, so the meeting is adjourned.